Good evening, everyone. Today I've been invited to talk about the nature of the mind. A lot of people wonder, what does Buddhism teach about us, about human beings, and about the nature of the mind? And do we have a mind? And when we know that we do have a mind or that we don't have a mind, what can we do with that knowledge? What is the goal of developing the mind in Buddhism, in the Dhamma that the Buddha taught? Let me start with some basic assumptions first. Let me ask you this question first. What is your purpose in life? Any ideas? There is a lot of people that have as a purpose in life to work and to do their best in their job, to make sure that they have a good job, they don't destroy or hurt anyone, and in that way contribute to a better world by doing their work, doing their job the best. This is one goal that some people might have. Another purpose, which is higher than that perhaps, I think you could say that it's more noble, is to develop character, or to develop virtues, to use an old word. We develop character by developing our habits and doing good deeds, abandoning all that is unwholesome, that is negative in our daily lives. This is what we call developing character. To say it in more practical terms, you might consider that you'd like to develop patience. You'd like to be a patient person, you like to be a generous person. This is your goal in life of some people. They might say that I was born in this world to be a good person. I'd like to be a good person. But then some people would just say that when you don't hurt anyone, then you already are a good person. But that would be amount to the first kind of goal. Just do your work and don't hurt anyone. But this is going a little further, saying that we can develop our goodness, our character, and in that way be a good person. There is actually an even more deeper goal. That is developing the mind. Developing the mind is not exactly the same as developing character. When we talk about developing the mind, we talk about developing the capabilities of the mind. In fact, we talk about developing the concentration of the mind and its quality. But we'll get back to that later. Now, it's an interesting thing that I'd like to note, first of all, that during the passing of years, we tend to value the latter types of purpose more, and the first one less. When we get a little older, we start more to reflect on our lives. We realize that our life and its time, the time that we have, is limited. And then we start to reflect, what can we do with our lives? So then we will tend to develop more purpose to develop goodness in life, and also to want to develop the mind and its quality. It's like illustrated in this cartoon to make it clear. The 4 stages of life. You ever seen this? When we are a kid, we read the comics page first. When we grow up, we read the sports page first. We're not really interested in anything else apart from that. When we are having a job, we have more responsibilities, we start to have more wrinkles in our face, then we read the news first. And then when we grow old, we really become an older person. Then we read the obituaries first. Actually, all of these stages are part of the life, part of our lives. But when we grow a little older, we tend to reflect and think about our lives different. But actually, all of these goals are very important in our lives. It's just that we sometimes are not very intent on studying about the latter goals when we are young. But actually we can. But let me first talk about the nature of our people, of our mankind. Some people, one man once asked me when I was sitting in the train, at that time I wasn't ordained yet, he asked me, what does Buddhism teach about whether we are born sinful or born good? Is it true that Buddhism teaches that we are good from nature? And I said, I didn't really have a clear-cut answer at the time. And then when I studied more about the Dhamma, about Buddhism, and became a monk, I realized now that I did have an answer. The answer that the Buddha would give to this question was, we human beings are what we do regularly. We are what we do. If we do good, it's easy to do good. And it's hard to do something negative. If we do negative things often, however, it's easy to do negative things, and will be hard to do something positive. It really depends all on our habits and tendencies. What we are then depends on how we develop the mind. That's the whole question. Then you could say that our life and our fate is in our hands. It all depends on how we develop the mind. Then what is the mind then? Or before we ask that question, is there such a thing as the mind? Or do we have only a brain? Some people say that, actually a lot. Most scientists, in their articles, the things that they write, their official statements, they would say that the mind is the brain. Some scientists are very strong about that. Anything else is all nonsense, is all gibberish. There is no such thing as a mind, they say. But now they are losing. They are losing the argument. Scientific evidence, more and more, is proving now that people do have some sort of consciousness apart from the brain. Many neurologists today are quite in doubt whether the brain is actually the same as the mind. In research about near-death experience, did you ever hear about that? Near-death experience? People who can see images when they die, when they almost die, and they reach a sort of stage between life and death. They can see images. First of all, they can see their own body. And they can see, sometimes, other places, other people that they have never seen before, or people that they know. They can see light sometimes, but sometimes also darkness. And most importantly, they can see things that they wouldn't be able to see normally. There was one woman from Eastern Europe. She was having a very serious condition and she had to undergo surgery. And during the surgery, her heart and her brain stopped functioning. At that time, She described that her mind, or let me put it in her words, she said she could see herself from an upper position. She could see her own body. And when she saw herself, she was surprised. How can I see myself there, lying there? And then she went up to the roof of the hospital, where she saw a pair of sports shoes. Sports shoes that were left at the roof of the hospital. When she woke up, she had survived the surgery. She woke up and she told her friends and the doctor about it. They were surprised. How is it possible to see these things, to know these things? And they checked at the roof of the hospital. They found a pair of shoes. How is it possible for her to know these things when in fact she was in her bed all the time? She didn't go to the roof of the hospital unless it was by her mind. Now in quantum physics, which is the most modern, well, the most recent development, you might say, and has a very great impact on modern science now. Quantum physics says that when they do research on the smallest level, protons, neurons, this level, it turns out that protons, neurons, and the like behave different when they look at it. When they look at these protons, they start to go one way. When they don't look, they go another way. Their behavior is different. I'm just using simple words now. This is a big riddle, a big question, a big problem in modern science. How is it possible that matter, like this paper or this computer, behaves different when we look at it than when we don't look? That means that there is an impact of the mind on matter. So there is something like a mind, right? You want to know more evidence? Let's look at the research of a man called John Larber. Very much accepted scientist, yet his research is very controversial. He did research on hydrocephalus patients, patients who have a disease in their brain since they are a child. This is a normal brain, cross-section of a normal brain. This is a cross-section of a hydrocephalus patient. There is hardly any brain. This man is a Frenchman who is, this picture was taken when he was still alive, of course. And he led a normal life. He was working for the taxes. He had his job was okay. He had a family. He was a bit slow, but he was not abnormal. And yet, he didn't hardly have any brain. And then John Larber said, this is my proof. And he had a lot of proof, not only this man, that made him ask the question, do we really need our brain? A question that scientists couldn't answer very well. They just considered that the question of Mr. Larber. They couldn't answer it. Can we answer it? We have to ask ourselves, what is the mind? In Buddhism, we say that the mind is an element. And it is a sphere. It has the shape of a sphere at the center of the body. Its characteristic feature is that it's capable of being conscious of things. We do consider the mind and the heart the same thing in Buddhism, but there are certain different processes or layers of the mind. The Buddha could see this very clearly, and he differentiated how and explained how the mind worked. He said when we see something or hear something or smell something, when we taste something or touch something, then it becomes a sensation. That sensation we then remember, what we might call a perception. That perception we start then to process, and it becomes what we might call a mental formation. That is a Buddhist term. What we think and feel about that perception. Then we become conscious of it. All of that is going on in our mind, so our mind is not a simple thing, it's very complex. And the Buddha acknowledged that. He also said something about our mind that is very important. And that is the main subject that I will talk about today. The characteristics of the mind. This is talking about the normal mind of you and me, everyday persons. He said it's separate from the body. It's not the body. But it is in the body. However, even though it is normally having its home in the body, it is wandering. It is wandering often and wandering very far, going everywhere. Some people meditate and tell me that they're so surprised that they didn't know they could think so many things in just a few minutes. Many hundreds and thousands of thoughts. Wandering everywhere, but wandering alone. What does that mean, wandering alone? The Buddha was saying that the mind, even though it thinks a lot, actually only thinks one thing at a time. But the mind thinks very quickly, so we don't notice. We feel that the mind thinks a lot at the same time, but actually it doesn't. You can compare that with a river, and in Buddhism it is compared with a river called the stream of consciousness. And the great psychologist William James used this term in Western psychology for the first time, which he borrowed from Buddhism, saying that the mind is like a stream, but actually that stream is composed of single drops of water. Why is this so important? This shows that even though we think many things, we think only one thing at a time, which means we have a choice. We can choose what we'd like to think about. And the mind will be on that object. It won't be on another object. Normally, our mind is inside our body, or you could say it lies inside its cave. But because it's often wandering and drifting off far, it is not often inside the body at its home. When it's not inside the body, where is it then? It is wandering all over the place. Sometimes we are angry with someone. Suppose our boss has promoted all our co-workers except for us. Oh, we feel so angry with our boss. We cannot stop thinking about our boss. Why did he not promote me? Why did he not do this, do that? Why did my boss do like this, like that? We feel so angry we cannot sleep. But in fact, our boss is sleeping very soundly already, sleeping very peacefully. But we are still angry and cannot sleep. Where is our mind at? when we think about our boss? Is it here or is it at our boss? Yes, at our boss. It's never here. That's why we can't sleep. Suppose you'd like to get a mobile phone, but your mother doesn't give it to you. She says, why do you need a mobile phone? Right? And you say, I really like to have a mobile phone. You cannot stop thinking about that mobile phone. All day long you think about that mobile phone. Where is your mind at? At the mobile phone, not here. That is how the mind acts. It wanders and it hooks. It attaches itself to things. And that's how our mind is hooked. When our mind attaches itself to things, we develop these attachments, and more importantly, we sometimes even gain some sort of delight from it. We feel happy just reading some magazines, watching the television, going to the movie, doing this, doing that. But when we just close our eyes and do nothing, we feel we can't. We feel we're not happy. We need these delights in the world. This is what our mind is normally like. But actually, there is another way, but I'll get to that. All of this we often are not aware of because the mind is very hard to see. Just like someone who is looking in the mirror and can only see the back of himself. The mind is difficult to control. We'd like to do our homework, right? We can never get ourselves to do our homework, right? We then find that it's very hard to focus on one single thing. You feel, oh, today I'll meditate for half an hour. Then you say, oh, I have little time left, maybe 15 minutes. You change your goal. It's very difficult to be focused on one thing. Difficult to control the mind. The mind is swift. It's very hard to control it. It is flickering, not very stable, not very reliable, and fickle. Difficult to guard and difficult to restrain. But the Buddha, he also said that actually difficult to guard and difficult to restrain. But the Buddha, he also said that actually the mind has a luminous nature which is hidden inside of every human being. This luminous nature is inside of us, but we are not aware of it. Therefore, we feel that when our mind is distracted like this, what we might call the monkey mind, dancing from this branch to the other branch, jumping from one tree to the other tree, we feel that this is our nature. But in fact, it's not. There is a deeper nature inside, and that is the luminous mind. The mind that is crystal clear and has a light of its own, without having to rely on electricity, without having to rely on a battery. Then the Buddha said this luminosity we can rediscover. But it's covered up by hindrances. It's covered up We cannot see it. But we can rediscover it by practicing the mind. And it is confirmed that we can practice the mind endlessly. There is no end to the way we can practice the mind. We can exercise our body only to some extent. We might get more muscles, but we cannot become bigger. We cannot become taller that much. We might stretch, do some yoga, but there are limits to our body. We can develop the skills in our work, become very skillful in our work, in our studies. But there are limits to that. Limits to the things we can remember, to the things we can develop. But when we talk about the mind, we talk about the quality of the mind, rather than just ordinary knowledge or skills, this is endless. We can develop the quality of the mind endlessly. So this is an important statement that is giving us hope and inspiration. If we couldn't develop the mind, then what would be the purpose of a spiritual path? But since we can develop the mind endlessly, there is a purpose. There is a goal, an ideal for those who aim for the spiritual path. But because the mind is so preoccupied with things we do not want to think of, because it jumps back and forth all the time, the mind quickly becomes impure and tired. All this tiredness is influencing our lives. We feel that sometimes we sleep for 8 hours. We should have a full night's rest. We should feel we have had a good rest, but when we wake up, we feel tired. Did you ever had that? Yes. This is because our mind is not still. Why is our mind not still? Why does it wander? Why does it go so far? And what does happen when it goes and wanders? We tend to see the world according to our interpretations, which are distorted from the facts. When I talked about attachments, the mind attaching itself outside, attaching itself to outside objects like our bus or the mobile phone, we tend to see things according to certain interpretations. Suppose you have a friend, and your friend wants to marry this guy, wants to have a relationship with this guy, but you know this guy is not reliable. You want to tell your friend, please don't have a relationship with this man. Even though you're very good friends, is it hard to tell? When she already likes that guy. Very hard to tell, often. We tend to see the world according to interpretations, which are distorted from the facts. Why? Because our mind is affected by impurities in the mind. Actually, as human beings, we can be compared to a number of blind men who are asked to touch an elephant and then asked, what are you feeling? What is this thing that you are touching now? And one blind man says, oh, it seems I'm touching, this is probably a snake that I'm touching now. Another blind man says, no, it's probably a crocodile. Another blind man says, another thing. All of them have a different view. All of them are somehow trying to find the truth, but they're blinded. Blinded by impurities are we all. Because of the attachments in the mind, we develop impurities When we develop impurities, we can't see things as they really are. Just like a man sitting in a train. Sitting in a train, because the train is moving very fast, you cannot really discern the landscape. Cannot really see the mountains, the rivers that clear. It's all passing very fast. Then we are quite like that sometimes when our mind is not still. When it's wandering all over the place, we cannot really see what reality is like, what things are really like. And all of this is caused by the impurities, or what is called in the Pali, the old Indian language, kilesa. The kilesa or impurities in the mind are elements deeply rooted in the mind structure from our birth onwards. They're there. Since the moment we are born, we open our eyes. They're very unclean and subtle, more subtle even than the mind, more deeply than the mind. It is not something that is alive. Don't get me wrong on this. It is not something that is alive like a demon or something like that. But it's something that affects us. Quite like rust is not alive but affects iron. Rust is not something that is alive. It is not some sort of animal that creates rust or some sort of demon. But it is there by its nature. And it eats the iron away when there are certain conditions that create the rust. The iron is eaten away in the same way our mind is also eaten away by the impurities. When outside sensory objects affect, tempt and provoke the mind, it is just like stirring up the mud at the bottom of a pool. Similarly, the mind becomes impure. Suppose you have mud at the bottom of a pool. You might not even know that there is a lot of mud in there. You might think it's very clear water. But once you step in it, the whole pool becomes dark. In the same way, the mind becomes impure when the dust that is in there, the mud that is in there, is stirred up when the mind is not still. The different processes of the mind that we talked about before, sensations, perceptions, mental formations and consciousness, are all impaired or damaged, and that makes the impurities arise. When we see something, we hear something, we smell something, that is not actually what we are seeing, we hear, we smell. It's distorted. We perceive it differently. When we think about it differently according to our interpretations. There was once one man who went to the doctor and he believed he was dead. I should say the doctor went to him, of course, because he was dead. He believed he was dead. The doctor saw him and he saw that his eyes were open. And he was greeting the doctor. And so the doctor said to him, "You are talking to me now. How can you say that you're dead when you're still talking to me?" Then he paused for a while and said, "Oh, I guess dead people can talk then." We always interpret things according to our interpretations that we have already formed, according to our preconceptions. These impurities in the mind that make our understanding distorted, that create the fuss, that create the noise in our mind. There are actually 3 of them. I've found a few funny images to make it look not too heavy. We are, since we are born, affected by greed, anger, and delusion that is in the mind. These three are always affecting the mind. How? They eat away the mind, press and squeeze the mind, wind themselves around and cover up the mind, ooze and seep into the mind, suffuse and pervade the mind, besmear and dye the mind, soak and drench the mind. In fact, to keep it very shortly and simply said, you can say that we are always affected by it. The mind is always in control of these impurities. We all tend to look for enemies outside us. We say, this country is the cause of all our troubles. This religion or that nationality is creating us suffering. But actually, the enemy is not outside at all. The cause of suffering of mankind, of us, human beings, can be found inside the mind. That is the real enemy inside. Or you might say with a more softer word, the cause of suffering, the impurities in the mind. But we always look for enemies outside. And of course there are social problems, political problems, environmental problems. But the people who cause these problems are people, and people have a mind. Everything starts with people, and people have a mind. Then in the Dhamma, in Buddhism, we say that we all have an enemy or a cause of suffering inside, and that is the impurities of the mind, not anything else. The impurities torment the mind throughout our life until death. Some of the most serious diseases usually only torment our body in some parts of our life. But the diseases of the mind that we are all born with torment the mind since the moment we are born. Is there anyone who is born in this world with a smile? We all cry since the moment we are born because of fear, because of all the suffering that we undergo. The impurities, fear and suffering torment the mind throughout our life until death. Because of this, we are used to these impurities as a fish is to water. We tend to feel that we can often not see our faults because of these impurities. We can often easily see the faults of others, but hard is it to see our own faults. Or even when we see our own faults, we cannot really see them clearly. We think that one thing is a fault when it's not, another thing is actually a fault, but we do not see it. When the fish is then drawn from the water and thrown upon the land, it struggles to go back to the water. There isn't any fish that will say, oh, I can live on the land, that's okay. They all go back and struggle to get back in the water. Likewise, if you want the mind to quit a habit, it will struggle with all its strength to persist doing the same thing again. We have, perhaps, a New Year's resolution. A New Year's resolution. Does any of you have a resolution for the new year? Some people say they would like to stop smoking. Some people will say they would like to stop drinking or quit some negative habit. Some people quit smoking. 1 month passes by, 2 months pass by, and they say to their friends and to themselves that they've already stopped smoking now. They can live without cigarettes. So they would have no need to worry about it anymore because they're not really attached to it, they're not really addicted to it, so they continue to smoke. So the whole effort of 2 months is gone. If you want the mind to quit a habit, it will struggle, sometimes even without us knowing. All of this may sound negative, but this is the condition of the mind. That's why in the Dhamma we emphasize so much the need to train the mind. The mind should be trained and developed. All of this may sound negative, but this is the condition of the mind. That's why in the Dhamma we emphasize so much the need to train the mind. The mind should be trained and developed. Because of this condition of suffering, this predicament of suffering, it is therefore an urgent matter to train the mind to become clear and calm, to solve all of these problems and conditions. We then come to the subject of developing the mind to some ideal state, to some good state. We already talked in the beginning about developing the mind, and that is a goal in life for some people. Then when we do have to talk about what that development is leading to, we come then to the question, when we develop the mind, what are we aiming for? Some people feel that developing the mind, we do that by reading books. Some people feel that developing the mind, we do that by discussions, by developing experience through our work and by other experiences. But there's also another view. But before I get to that, let me ask you this question. When we talk about development of the mind, how about we study about the word mental health? We talk about the mind so much now today, but what is actually the ideal state of the mind, ideal condition of the mind? What is mental health? The World Health Organization, which is the international standard when they talk about the development of health in both body and mind, says mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. This was a definition given in 2005. The World Health Organization defines mental health like this. They talk about a state, and they then talk about what we can cope with, that we can work well, can lead our lives well. Is that a definition? Or is it just a description of what our mind is like when it's healthy? It is not really a definition of what is health of mind. What are the characteristics of this state of mind? What is this state of well-being that the World Health Organization is talking about? In the Dhamma, we talk about the word right concentration. The development of the mind is focused on this. We have as our aim to develop the mind to right concentration. to develop the mind by right concentration, I should say. When the mind is still and unwaveringly stable at the center of the body, it becomes subtle, soft, and bright. This is what we call right concentration. So the mind has a certain quality, like everything else in the world. The meditation mats that you are sitting on have a certain quality. Do you like the mats? If you like them, it may be because they have a certain quality. They may be good quality or bad quality. The mind also has a certain quality which can be developed. Our great teacher, Luang Wat Phra Dhammakaya Benelux, who is also known as Sotantasaro, he used the word stand still or stillness. In Thai language, Yut Ning. And he said that the more the mind is practiced, becomes more still, the brighter, clear, happy, at peace, powerful, cheerful, and joyful it will be when the mind is still. This is a condition that is necessary. The mind can only be brought to pacification, can only be brought to peace when the mind is still. When the mind is practiced very well like this, it develops a certain brightness. This is very important. An inner light. All of us, inside of us, are able to discover an inner light. This inner light is hidden inside of us. This inner light, when the mind is still, comes up and lights up the mind, illuminates the mind, and makes it possible for us to see our mind fully. We can see our own mind. Human beings, are we capable of doing that? In Buddhism, we say yes. We can see our own mind. In the end, it is even possible for us to understand the truth of life, such as where we are born. When we die, where will we go? Before we were born, where did we come from? What is the purpose of life? All of these questions can be found not by looking into books only, but most importantly, by looking inside. To tap in the inner wisdom that is available in everyone, as long as we use the potential of the mind by developing its stillness. And now we then come to an important point, because all of this is a goal. We talk about how the mind can be developed, but then the question is, how do we get to develop the mind like this? There is a path for that. When the Buddha became enlightened under the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago, he then reflected, how did he attain this enlightenment? Yes, through the brightness that I just described, through the stillness of mind. But how did he work to that stillness? It all started with a right understanding. Suppose in your case, all of you like to meditate, right? You like to meditate, why? Why do you like to meditate? Because you feel that meditation is something good. You have a positive attitude about meditation. You have a positive attitude. What is that positive attitude? You feel that when you meditate, it gives you positive results. You might even feel that its results somehow have an impact on other people. So you feel that doing something good brings good results. Or in other words, persistence in good deeds pays off. Persistence pays off, that is basically right understanding. Right motive means that we think positively. We do not want to hurt anyone. If our mind is positive, we think positively, thinking about all other living beings as our fellow human beings, suffering from the same things, having similar problems in life, not that different from us, also looking for happiness in life. Then we do not want to hurt anyone. This is right motive. That is affecting our mind, a right concentration. Because if our mind is positively thinking, it's easy to meditate. Easy to bring the mind to stillness. When our mind is negatively thinking, when it's angry, it's hard to bring our mind to stillness. Right speech means speaking in a positive way and an endearing way, not gossiping or something like that, but speaking positively, encouraging someone else. When we speak all day long in a positive way, we will find when we close our eyes, our mind is very positive. This is how our mind and our actions are related. Right action, that means our actions through our physical actions, the things that we do physically. Also the things that we do that are not speech. Like when some person might be a hunter. I once met one man who was a hunter before. And when he tried to meditate, he only could see pictures of animals that he once had shut down. So the things we do have an effect. Right action then is talking mostly about our actions in daily life in general. And right livelihood is actually about our profession. These two are also affecting our right concentration. Because when we meditate, it's like a miniature of what we have done throughout the day. We will all experience the things, the feelings, depending on what we have done throughout the day. Right striving is then a decision, a decisiveness to overcome any bad habits that we have and develop good habits. Develop ourselves in a positive way by developing positive habits. Some things are hard to give up, but we try to give it up. When we succeed and practice like this, then we call it right striving. This is an important factor as well for good meditation. You can imagine that if we do not have determination to develop positive mindset, to develop ourselves positively, it may be hard to meditate, to find time to actually be able to let go of any other commitments to meditate. Lastly, right mindfulness is very important for the mind to develop right concentration, or for the mind to have a good meditation experience. Because if our mind throughout the day is not wandering that far, is close to ourselves, when our mind is not that distracted, then it's easily to bring the mind to the center, to bring the mind to meditation when we come to the step of right concentration or meditation. So you see that everything in our daily life is affecting our mind. So the Buddha, when he reflected on his enlightenment, he saw that all his actions that he had done had led to this point, and that positive actions through body, through our words, our actions, our thoughts, all of these led him to enlightenment. and were all important in the process. To put it in another model, you could look at this model. With attainment of unknown factor, I mean the attainment of Dhamma, attainment of meditation experience inside. All of these factors that I just mentioned also affect each other. Right understanding makes us think positively, having right motive. Right motive, when we have right thoughts, right motive, it's easy to speak positively and act positively. We will choose a good profession and act positively in our profession. And we will decide to develop our positive habits, everything that's positive, into good habits, and to give up any negative habits that we might have. That also leads us to more mindfulness. When we have more mindfulness, we will have more concentration. When we have more concentration, then also we find we develop more right understanding. This is an important point. When we develop right concentration, the mind develops right understanding. Why is that? Because when the mind is still, very basically speaking, it is clear. When it is clear, it's easy to think things through. When we can think things through easily, it's easy to solve problems in life. And we will find that we can solve things easily. This problem-solving capability we call also wisdom, and this is part of right understanding. When the mind is still, it's easy to see things as they really are. So you can go back to the metaphor of the pool of water. When the mud has all sank down to the bottom, then it's easy for the water to just be clear. The same way, when our mind is still, it will develop purity. And through that purity, we can understand things in life. Or another comparison is a mirror. Even though we only have a small mirror, if that mirror is clear, it's not dirty, is it possible through this mirror that we can see the greatest mountains, the greatest buildings in the world? As long as we just maintain the right corner, keep it at the right angle, it's possible to see things, everything. In the same way, when our mind is clear, we might be only one single person in the world, and we feel that we might not be that important. But it's actually possible for us to understand the reality of life in the world, even on those things, on those topics that we cannot decide, cannot understand by observing with the naked eye. So you might say that some things that we cannot see with the naked eye, we can see with the mind. But the mind that is developed, when the mind develops a brightness, it can see things that the naked eye cannot see. This is a process, however. In the beginning, we have right understanding to some extent, and we develop right motive, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right striving, right mindfulness, and right concentration, creating a better right understanding, which makes for a better right motive. We develop the right speech, right action, right livelihood, and again, we develop ourselves. In this way, we develop ourselves like in a concentric circle, eventually leading to the attainment of Dhamma, or the attainment of the unknown factor, or the attainment of meditation experience, and we will know the truth of life. This is very basically speaking the very purpose of Buddhism. And the Buddha said that all what he has taught is for this purpose, not for any other purpose. Just like an ocean has only one taste, that is the taste of salt. In the same way, the Dhamma or the teachings that he had taught were only for this purpose, to develop the mind, to attain the truth of life and to understand the truth of life. But we have to take it step by step. We create the conditions for the mind to develop itself, and the mind can develop itself easily. We have to take time for the mind to develop itself when we close our eyes and meditate. Then we can focus on the most important aspect of this path, that is right concentration. And when we develop our mind like this, we will see that it has a gradual development that is very firm. But sometimes we might fall back. It is just like you have a screwdriver and you are driving a screw into the wall. At a certain point, when you're just starting to drive, the screw might still fall out of the wall. But when you actually drive the screw for a while, then it will be firm and it can't fall out of the wall anymore. In the same way, the mind is more and more developed and becomes deeper, more focused and more stable at the center of the body in a meditative state. Even during our daily lives, when we close or open our eyes, it doesn't matter. Our mind will be pure and happy because of all the effort through this path that we have taken. So this is the very goal of Buddhism and the very purpose that the Buddha taught his teaching, the Dhamma. He earned him the name of the Buddha because of what he had attained. It was not his first name or his family name. The Buddha means the enlightened one or the awakened one, the one who saw and knew because of the light inside, awakened from the slumbering ignorance that covers up the mind that hasn't been practiced. But when the Buddha attained enlightenment, he never asked any copyright for that. All human beings are able to attain enlightenment as long as we commit ourselves and practice the mind in the right way and be committed till the right moment is there and we can all attain and learn about the truth inside. So meditation, starting with simple relaxation, can eventually help us to discover the truth of life, to understand all the questions that we have, to solve them all, and to find what is the real nature of the world and of life. Do you have any questions? You can ask any questions if you have. Have any questions? So then I will conclude for this session today about the nature of the mind in Buddhist psychology. Thank you for listening to today's program. Tharen Phor.